What's up, guys? Here are my predictions for UFC 232 happening this Saturday, and it's a super stacked card, and I cannot wait. And we're going to start with BJ Penn versus Ryan Hall. Now, this is going to be a pretty interesting fight, especially if it goes to the ground. But one thing we have to know about this fight is BJ Penn is over the hill. And that's to say it mildly, to be honest. Even though he was a formidable boxer, he was a very dangerous boxer, I think in this fight, even Ryan Hall will give him problems on the feet. And Ryan Hall is notably a high-level BJJ artist, which is not going to do many favors for BJ Penn, right? The footwork, the kicking, the modern-day style that a lot of these younger fighters have taken, it just overlaps what BJ Penn used to do. Penn is a little bit too plodding. He boxes for the most part. No kicks, no elbows really. Flying knees are going to be used here and there. And he could go for takedowns. I do see this fight going to the ground eventually. But is he on the level of Ryan Hall when it comes to the ground game? Ryan Hall's very good with the 50-50. Really good with leg locks. Great Imanari rolls. And just super dangerous on the ground. So my prediction for this fight, I just think BJ Penn's over the hill. I don't think he's going to be able to handle Ryan Hall in most areas. So I'm going to go with Ryan Hall. I'm going to go by a third round submission, which is kind of crazy because BJ Penn has never been submitted, and this is by far the highest level BJJ artist he has ever faced. The constant kicks from Ryan Hall are really going to give BJ Penn a lot of problems. The movement, he's never going to be there for BJ Penn. And I could just see that going throughout the whole fight. Just a lot of movement and a lot of kicks from Ryan Hall. And that's pretty much all he really needs on the feet. And if it gets to the ground, I think he will be too much for Penn there too. Then we go to Zingano versus Megan Anderson. This fight is going to be pretty compelling because Zingano's coming up to featherweight, and she's fighting the biggest female fighter in the UFC in Megan Anderson. Now, Zingano's more so of a grappler, and she will strike, but she takes a lot of risks. A lot of lunging punches, a lot of flying knees, front kicks, and no defense to any of it. Right? She is wide open every time she throws strikes. And against Megan Anderson, who is that much longer and bigger and more powerful than she is, it's going to be ill-advised. And Megan Anderson just overall has better striking. Really good high kicks, long punches, very good straight, pump out jabs on Zingano because Zingano's going to have to try to take this fight to the ground. What we saw from Megan Anderson in her last fight with Holly Holm, her ground game was exposed against someone like Holly Holm, who has never really dominated anybody on the ground before. So that's going to be very interesting. Zingano going for takedowns, she is very, very strong. We've seen her multiple times get takedowns on Amanda Nunez. But will the size of Anderson be too much of a factor in this fight? That's the X factor coming to this one. So my prediction for this fight, it's a tough one to call. It's really tough to call. But I'm going to go with Zingano. I can very well see her lose this fight, especially if it stays on the feet, and especially if she can't get in on Anderson. But Anderson lunges a little bit too far in, which can leave double legs and scrambles and takedowns for Zingano. And I think as soon as it gets to the ground, Zingano's going to do whatever she wants to Anderson. If it stays on the feet, I don't really give Zingano many chances. So I'm going to go with Zingano. I'm going to go by a second round submission. Then we go to the main card. Chad Mendes versus Alexander Volkanovski. This is one of the best fights in the entire card. May even be the fight of the night. Two guys very well matched, very similar styles, and similar build. Now, both these guys have very good right hands, very good overhands, good ability to enter with a jab and mix it up with the right hand and then go for takedowns after that. Both their double legs are amazing. But Volkanovski goes for these takedowns a lot more than Chad Mendes does. He's very consistent on trying to get the takedown, especially against the cage. And he is powerful on top. Great ground and pound. When he stacks on opponents, you could just see the pressure he's able to put on them. And relentless pressure when it comes to the ground. But the biggest thing about this fight that makes me favor Chad Mendes is way faster than Volkanovski. Volkanovski is going to have a little bit longer of a reach. But he is much, much slower than Chad Mendes is. And he's lacking a lot of the technique, a lot of the variety in the striking that Mendes. Mendes has very good leg kicks. His left hook is amazing. His uppercuts are amazing. And he is so quick to land that right hand on opponents. And here's the biggest thing. Mendes has never been taken down in the UFC. Ever. And he is a high-level wrestler, especially for MMA. So in this fight, I'm going to have to go with Chad Mendes. I think he's a better version of Volkanovski. Or should I say Volkanovski is a lesser version of Chad Mendes. So I'm going to go with Chad Mendes. I'm going to go by a first-round TKO. Then we go to Ilir Latifi versus Corey Anderson. An important fight for the light heavyweight division. The winner of this fight is going to be pretty close to get a title shot, I would say, especially for Latifi. Now, Latifi is a shorter fighter, of course, but he is extremely powerful. I think he has a power advantage, the speed advantage, he's more athletic, and his wrestling is powerful as well. Same thing like Chad Mendes, never been taken down in his entire career, Corey Anderson is also a wrestler. You could just see his takedown average. Anderson always works for the takedowns, and his striking is not up to par with Ilir Latifi's. Latifi, he has great kicks, good leg kicks, good hook kicks, spinning kicks, overhands. He can switch stances too, and fights equally as dangerous in either stance. And his ability to cover distance is going to be a problem for Anderson. Anderson, of course, going to be the longer fighter. He's going to pump out a lot of jabs. He's going to try to keep this at a distance, but Anderson doesn't have the power to really threaten Latifi to get off him. And sometimes he leaves himself a little bit vulnerable, especially when he's pressured up against the cage. So my prediction for this fight, I'm going to go with Ilir Latifi, and I'm going to go by a second round TKO. I wouldn't be surprised if this goes to a decision because Corey Anderson is a really tough guy, but I see him leaving himself exposed and Latifi cash in with an overhand. Then we go to Carlos Condit versus Michael Chiesa. Intriguing fight in the welterweight division where Michael Chiesa is coming up for 155 up to 170, and he looks like he's going to be a pretty good size 170er. Very similar build, very similar size to Carlos Condit. Now, Carlos Condit is more so of a striker, very good kickboxing, great spinning techniques, great combinations. He relies more on volume than he does on power, but he does have the power as a backup, especially like we saw against Dan Hardy, for instance, right? The left hook exchanges, as well as you saw him when he fought Roy McDonald. But there's the thing about Carlos Condit. His takedown defense is pretty poor, to say mildly. I mean, it is not too hard to get in on him, even from the opening with takedowns, and that's going to be a huge advantage for Michael Chiesa. Chiesa isn't as much of a striker, but he is a legitimate threat on the ground. And I believe he's going to work for the takedowns. He's going to be healthier at 170. He's going to have a better chin, of course, and he is not going to give up any reach to Carlos Condit. But here's the thing about Carlos Condit. When he throws strikes, he really needs opponents to stay in front of him or march backwards. Chiesa, when he's trying to go for takedowns, he smothers you. When he throws combinations, jabs, straight right hand, double leg right there. His combinations, his forward pressure, or whenever he decides to attack, it's a smothering style. And it's going to close in a lot of the strikes of Carlos Condit. Now, the only thing Chiesa's going to have to worry about are flying knees and potentially head kicks. Everything else, it's going to be tough for Condit to catch Chiesa with, I believe. And if it gets to the ground, I believe Chiesa's going to have an advantage. But Condit, he isn't defenseless on the ground. He has pretty good submissions himself. So my prediction for this fight, I'm going to go with Michael Chiesa. I think he's going to win on points here. I don't think he's going to submit Carlos Condit, but I think the takedowns and the pressure is just going to give him points for the whole fight. I think it's going to be a close fight. It might be a controversial decision where people think Condit deserved to win the fight because maybe he landed more shots, and Chiesa wins the fight due to takedowns and just pressure. Then we go to the co-main event, Cris Cyborg versus Amanda Nunez. I mean, what do you say about this fight? The winner of this fight, I think, legitimizes who is the greatest female fighter of all time. And these two are pretty similar in their approaches. Both pressuring fighters, sit at a distance and look for that right hand. They are two of the most powerful fighters in women's MMA history. They have a very good ability to gauge the right hand. Amanda Nunez especially off her jabs, and her distance management is some of the best in the business. She has a stinging jab, stinging right straight, which is her best punch. She has good kicks as well, leg kicks, spinning kicks, tapes to the body. And where she's going to have an advantage in this fight is going to be in the clinch, because Cris Cyborg that we saw in the Holly Holm fight as well as the Yana Kunitskaya fight, she seems to give up the clinch exchanges. She doesn't really, it seems like she doesn't put as much effort into them. And she gets in bad positions sometimes. Yana Kunitskaya almost got her back at one point. And Nunez is very strong in the clinch. Really good judo, good hips, and because of that she has good trips, she has good throws. And on the ground, I believe she's going to be better than Cris Cyborg. Cyborg is going to be the stronger fighter, but I think technically Amanda Nunez is going to be a better BJJ artist. Nunez has a really good ability to get the back of the opponent. And it's going to be very interesting to see how Cris Cyborg does on the ground, because we haven't really seen her on the ground too much for a prolonged period of time. Kunitskaya almost got her back, which makes you think Nunez should be able to get the back if it goes to the ground. Now, where Cris Cyborg is going to have an advantage is, of course, power, size, and not just that, cardio. Nunez fades. Cyborg does not. And Cyborg is more powerful. That is a scary thing to come by. And Cyborg has an amazing ability to counter with her right hand, especially over the top. Waits for the opponent to blitz in on her, throw some long strike on her, and she has a natural ability to get off center lines with her punches, which means she's checking the boxes. She's being defensive on the punches, but landing her offense as well. But there's that thing, Nunez doesn't really go in too much when she throws strikes. She has very good distance management. So my prediction for this fight, I'm going to have to go with Cris Cyborg at the end of the day. I think the cardio and the chin and the toughness of Cyborg is going to prevail in this one. I do see her having some problems early in the fight, especially with the speed and the footwork of Amanda Nunez. Nunez could be very elusive on her feet, very light, and I think for the first 2 rounds, it's going to give Cyborg some problems. But I think Cyborg keep marching forward with the never-ending pressure, as well as the never-ending cardio. I think she's going to eventually catch Amanda Nunez later in the fight. So I'm going to go with Cyborg. I'm going to go by a 4th round knockout. Then we go to the main event. Jon Jones versus Alexander Gustafsson 2. Now there's already controversy. There's already X factors about this fight, which makes it even harder to predict. Now another thing about this is they're coming off layoffs. And Gustafsson is actually coming off a longer layoff than Jon Jones. And when we look at history, when they came off layoffs before, after Jones fought DC the first time and came back against OSP, he didn't really look too well. But when he came back to fight Daniel Cormier the second time, which is around the same layoff from the DC 1 to OSP, he looked really good. So it looks like Jones can really fight coming off a layoff. And now for Alexander Gustafsson, he had somewhat of a layoff, almost 1 whole year from Daniel Cormier to Jan Blachowicz, and that was not an impressive Gustafsson. When people saw that Gustafsson, everybody thought that he broke from the Daniel Cormier fight or something. So from history, Jones has been shown to be a better fighter coming back from a layoff. And the fact that he won the first fight, that already gives some points to Jon Jones. Now what we saw from their last fights, they both have progressed. Jones against DC2 and Gustafsson against Teixeira. They both made massive improvements since the last time we saw them prior to that fight. Jones was a lot more comfortable with the striking. He was a lot more comfortable with his boxing, letting off a lot of left straights, more jabs, and just being more active with the strikes. Whereas Gustafsson was a lot more relentless with his strikes, as well as chaining up his shots, which was one of the things holding him back in the first fight with Jon Jones. He was a lot more of a sniper in that fight, but now after that fight with the Jimmy Manuwa fight, as well as the Teixeira fight, he's really chaining up his punches and getting off on angles and switching stances mid-combinations. I would say Gustafsson made more improvements since that fight, because he also has a takedown threat to everybody, even against Cormier. Now, what that leads me to think is, Gustafsson should have a path to victory here, especially if Jones is going to come out more so the same he did in the first fight, which I don't think so, because if the excuses are true that he didn't really prepare for Gustafsson and he's doing it this time, it's going to be very interesting to see what Jones' game plan is going to be, because he's a methodical fighter before fights where he comes up with game plans and studies his opponents. If there's one weakness I have seen from Gustafsson that Jones could probably capitalize, is that Gustafsson ducks a lot nowadays. When he fought Teixeira, he was ducking a lot. It may have to do with Teixeira throwing a lot of hooks and haymakers, and that is why Gustafsson was ducking under almost every shot. But he was also doing it against DC. Maybe also knowing that DC throws overhands. Will he do it against Jon Jones? If he does, he might get caught by head kicks, if not knees. So that goes into my prediction. If Gustafsson is not compromised, if he comes into the fight and doesn't look like he has ring rust, I think he should win this fight. I think he has the tools and the approach and the progression to beat Jon Jones in a rematch. If he doesn't come out the same and shows ring rust, Jon Jones will beat him. There's too many X factors about this fight, man. It's almost impossible to predict, especially because how close they fought the first time with everything coming to this one. So I guess if I'm going to have to make a prediction here, I'm going to stick with Gustafsson. So I think Gustafsson's going to win. I think he's going to win by a 5th round TKO. I think he's going to catch Jon Jones eventually. I think the damage is going to accumulate throughout the fight. I would say starting from the 2nd or 3rd round on. That's when I see Gustafsson landing more shots on Jones. I see him probably letting off for the first round or so, and then really picking up the pace. And then let's look at the betting guys to see if there's anything interesting. Megan Anderson is an underdog. She is not out of that fight. That fight's so close. Definitely a path to victory for Anderson. Carlos Condit's an underdog. I would think he would be the favorite. And Alexander Gustafsson is an underdog. I'm picking him to win. But it's such a close fight. It's a real gamble, that one. Everything else I pretty much agree with. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you enjoyed my content, make sure to subscribe. For my next video, I'm going to come out with my post-fight reaction, most likely. Not guaranteed, but most likely. And then I'm going to make a breakdown of one of the fights this weekend. So be lookout for those. And again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.